Hello, and welcome to Wellness Wednesday, where I give tips on having a healthy brain and achieving total person wellness. It's been a while since my last broadcast, as you can tell from the length of my beard. Some of my friends have actually started to measure time by how long my beard is since they've seen me last. But I'm not here to talk about my beard, but about procrastination. You see, it's that time of year when we're all thinking about New Year's resolutions. Perhaps you remember the New Year's resolutions you made last year, and you determined that this year it's going to be different. And so you start off the year with some high hopes and lofty goals, but then, if you're like most people, as the year progresses, those goals kind of slip through your fingers, and you feel frustrated and guilty. One of the main reasons we fail to follow through with our goals is because we procrastinate. I talk to many people who share with me that they sabotage their success by procrastinating. In this video, I'm going to be explaining about why we procrastinate and what you can do to overcome it. But first, I need to marinate you in a little brain science. So in the human brain, we have something called the prefrontal cortex. This is located in the front of our brain, just above our forehead. And this is the part of our brain that enables us to engage in long-term planning and goal-directed behaviors. But we also have the subcortical regions of the brain located under the prefrontal cortex. And this is the part of the brain that regulates our habit systems and behaviors that are automated. So when you do things without really thinking about it, when you like eating or habits or gratifying your short-term needs or engaging in anxiety avoidance behaviors, this is all the subcortical regions of the brain that are that's propelling that. And this also includes the limbic system, which regulates our instincts, our most basic instincts. Now, the subcortical regions of the brain are not very good at helping us take steps towards reaching our long-term goals or delaying short-term gratification. So what happens when we procrastinate is that the subcortical regions of the brain, the part of the brain, remember, that regulates our habit systems and our short-term needs and instincts, that part of the brain overrides the prefrontal cortex, sabotaging our ability to engage in goal-directed behaviors. This particularly happens when the steps towards reaching our goals are associated with some level of anxiety. Studies show that procrastination has a high correlation with anxiety. We might feel anxiety about a task because of fear of failure, or because of perfectionism, or maybe we're overmotivated to reach our goals. Ironically, overmotivation can produce anxiety when we feel like we just have to finish something or our life depends on it. That creates high levels of anxiety. Now, the drive to avoid anxiety is one of the most basic human needs, like food and water. And the subcortical regions of the brain that I mentioned earlier are particularly good at helping us engage in habits of anxiety avoidance. Anxiety avoidance offers a kind of negative reinforcement for the brain. So negative reinforcement involves avoiding an adverse stimulus, just as positive reinforcement involves eliciting a favorable outcome. So when we're anxious about a task, perhaps because it feels overwhelming, and we find something that takes us away from that task, then to do that other thing offers a kind of short-term negative reinforcement, because it's diverting us away from what's causing anxiety. And this is why, contrary to what many people think, procrastinators are not people who do very little, but people who actually keep themselves perpetually busy, but busy with anything other than what they actually ought to be performing. The tasks that they ought to be performing, they avoid, and engage in this kind of pseudo-productivity with other things. Keeping very, very busy, but not actually reaching their goals. Now, fortunately, there's a solution to this. Since procrastinators tend to keep busy with anything other than what they're supposed to be doing, one solution to procrastination is to kind of reverse engineer this and spend time just doing nothing. It seems kind of counterintuitive, but in the series of great courses, there's a course called Outsmart Yourself, Brain-Based Strategies to a Better You. And Dr. Peter Vishton gives a lecture there about procrastination. And he shares studies with college students showing that the research is indicating that spending a period of time, about 20 minutes, just doing nothing at all, is very effective in helping people overcome procrastination. By intentionally doing nothing at all for 20 minutes, you avoid being sucked into the maze of productivity and avoidance behaviors that are associated with procrastination. Now, sitting quietly for 20 minutes may also help lessen the anxiety associated with the task. Think back to what I said about the two parts of the brain. The flurry of pseudo-productivity that the procrastinator engages in is directed by unconscious processes rooted in the limbic system, the part of the brain that has a strong incentive for avoiding what is unpleasant. So if during these 20 minutes you're doing some anxiety management techniques, then that can help to lower the unpleasantness associated with the task. So during these 20 minutes, you're not doing nothing, but you are not doing the type of pseudo-productivity that is characteristic of the procrastinator, whether it's checking your emails or finding this other little thing to do, or doing things that are on the periphery of your task without actually taking the steps you need. To some, there's kind of two reasons that sitting quietly for 20 minutes can help with procrastination. One, you're avoiding the pseudo-productivity that distracts yourself from the steps you need to take. And also, you can use that time to engage in anxiety management techniques. Now, one of the most effective anti-anxiety techniques that I use is aromatherapy. I've got some of my essential oils here, as you can see. And there's a lot of scientific peer-reviewed research showing a connection between pleasant aroma and mood, and including moods that help alleviate some of our anxiety. A lot of this research was published in 2002 by Cambridge University Press. They published a volume called Olfaction, Taste, and Cognition, kind of channeling a lot of the research on aromatherapy and mood and how our sense of smell is connected to our emotions. And I recommend you get that book from the library and read it. I using essential oils all the time to help with anxiety management, especially citrus oils and oils from trees like Idaho blue spruce and frankincense. And research on frankincense shows that it's particularly effective in mitigating anxiety and regulating the brain's limbic system. In 2008, the Journal of the Federation of American Societies for Experimental Biology, they published research from an international team of scientists who had discovered that burning frankincense activates channels in the brain that help alleviate anxiety and depression. So, if you're having anxiety about a project and that is compelling you to procrastinate, try diffusing frankincense while sitting still for 20 minutes. Make sure that the oil is completely organic and therapeutic grade and that it's been harvested from the first distillation only. And we'll have more videos about that later and the importance of it. But I want to share some other techniques that help with procrastination. One is self-talk. Remember, when we procrastinate, it's often because we are experiencing the type of negative reinforcement that comes when we deflect ourselves from something that is unpleasant. And knowing that this is going on in your brain can help you engage in self-talk, help you talk your way through it. You can begin to watch your own mental and emotional processes like a detached observer. And when you do that, you can talk yourself through what's going on and how you do not want your long-term goals to be sabotaged by the temporary relief that procrastination provides. Now, here's another technique that you can use to kind of bypass or hack, if you will, your brain's limbic system. In a sense, tricking your brain so that the subcortical regions do not sabotage the ability of your prefrontal cortex to reach your goals. Here's how you do it. If there's a project that feels particularly overwhelming, commit to just doing it for 15 or 20 minutes a day, or even less. It could be as 3 to 5 minutes. Now, not only does this make the task less overwhelming, but it enables you to habituate the new routine in a way that isn't threatening to your brain's limbic system. You see, the human brain is a kind of tug-of-war between two opposing impulses. On the one hand, our brain very easily likes change and can commit to improvements and trying new things. But then there's another part of our brain that always kind of resets back to the status quo. And that's why if you start a diet or a new exercise routine or try to learn a new language, you might start off pretty good. You might spend a few weeks making inroads every day. You spend an hour on this project, but sooner or later, if you're like most people, the brain resets to the habits and patterns that it's familiar with, because there's that other part of our brain that fears change. And one way to sort of hack around the brain's reset mode is to introduce change in segments that are so small that it cannot possibly be threatening. Even if you're just doing something for 3 minutes a day. And then once that has been established as a habit, and you've kind of gone past that time when the brain would normally reset, then you can increase the size of the step a little bit. Go from 3 minutes to 5 minutes, 5 minutes to 10 minutes, 10 minutes to 20 minutes. And you're increasing the size of the step small enough so as not to jeopardize the habit that you've created. Because when we are trying to overcome procrastination or other destructive behaviors, it's all about creating new habits, creating productive habits that can replace the unproductive ones. And to create new habits, we have to take things very small at the beginning, and then then increase the size of the steps. And if you're working on a project for just 20 minutes a day, or even for 5 minutes a day, what happens, and this is really cool, is that the success becomes self-perpetuating, because not only are you creating a new habit in a way that's not threatening to your brain's limbic system, but as you gradually make progress on the task, it may come to feel less overwhelming. You may even find yourself wanting to spend more time on it, and then the additional progress will become self-perpetuating, because it will encourage you to keep on, and the anxiety levels will lessen. Now, I want to give a final tip on procrastination that's kind of related to what I just said, but builds on that. And that is to give yourself rewards along the way as you complete subtasks. One of the reasons that we get overwhelmed by tasks is because we approach them as a whole when we should be approaching them as a series of manageable parts. For example, suppose on the weekend you had a big party and all the guests left a tremendous mess in the kitchen. And you wake up on Monday morning and you're like, I just can't deal with this. You just feel overwhelmed. Now, you may conclude that you just don't have time and energy to tackle it. Now, that's an understandable human reaction. But there's another way to think about the work you need to do. And all it just involves tweaking your thinking a little bit. and you see it in a whole new light. And that's you look at the job as one part, one segment. All you're trying to do is get half the dishes done, or maybe just working on it for 10 minutes. And then you go to something else. But then when you come back to it, it'll be a little bit less overwhelming because you've already got a start. And then, okay, I'll do this next subtask. And many projects are like that. They can only be completed by breaking them down into the constituent parts and tackling them as time and energy allows. But then, and this is the really cool thing, after you finish that subtask, give yourself a reward. Enjoy it. The human beings find it very hard to persevere for a task for a long time if there's no pleasure associated with it. And this is characteristic we share with rodents as well. Laboratory research has proved this. If there's a project where there's not light at the end of the tunnel until a year later, or maybe a month later, we will find it very hard to keep going. You can bypass this problem by giving yourself rewards along the way. Positive reinforcement rather than negative reinforcement. Well, I hope that some of this has helped you to see that you do not have to be a victim of procrastination. It's possible to keep your New Year's resolutions and reach your goals, and to enjoy yourself in the process. Please join me next week for another edition of Wellness Wednesday, your source for having a healthy brain and achieving total person wellness.